A random assignment, and look at that, school choice ahead. What does this mean? Well, the mask mandates could be, if they're coming to your town, that might be driving a lot more school choice to your town. So I am Bob Bowden in my normal confines here of, well, we'll call it the Choice Media Central Jersey office, which is my basement. However, Corey DeAngelis looks like he's on the road. Like a traveling man, as an old song once called it. How you doing, Corey?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I actually had to drive and get a rental car today too because the destination was not far enough to warrant a flight, and actually the whole flight debacle would have taken longer than just driving here. But I don't have a car in DC, so I had to get a rental. I'm at the Pennsylvania Capitol for a press conference tomorrow on House Bill 1, which is a universal education savings account program, which would be huge. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow.
Good for you. Well, just one note, we had talked about internally at Choice Media, we talked about the title of the show. We've talked about, I've tried to work in this concept of a hashtag. Now it's a few years old. A few years ago, historians circa 2017 or 18 will remember this concept of the Brexit movement of Britain leaving the EU. And then it became in the US, there was a Blexit version, which was something about domestic politics in the US. And so we thought, we need a hashtag to convey this idea of people leaving traditional public education to do something else. So we looked at, I thought Skexit would be something. School exit, to refer to anytime someone leaves a school, Skexit. But it couldn't be it couldn't be spelled S exit, because then it would sound like the word sex would be confusing. And we couldn't call it SC exit because that was a Scotland exit movement at the time of the Britain exit. So we came up with SCH exit as the official hashtag. And frankly, so far, nothing has taken off in terms of my usage of the Skexit hashtag. But anyway, but then we came up with these other ones. Should it be like Exodus, which is kind of like Exodus, or hashtag Ed Exodus, or hashtag Pub Ed Exodus, or we were trying to. Do you think, Corey, it would be useful to have some sort of a hashtag to basically summarize this idea that with all these mandates coming, whether you want to call it, about CRT or transgenderism or about school closures or masks or all this stuff, that all of this together should have an umbrella hashtag involving families deciding to leave? What do you say?
I don't know of any great hashtag to use except for fund students, not systems, and that one's kind of long, but and it doesn't capture exactly what you're talking about, which is an exodus from the public school system. So I don't know. I mean, when you had sent me a message on this, I was like, what the hell is hashtag SCHEXIT?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, he's playing on Brexit with schools and exiting. So I figured it out myself, but I actually ended up changing my tweet from the title to something else. I just so it wasn't so complicated. But the title on the YouTube is still, what is it? More mandates, more Skexit.
Well, Kate will laugh if she hears you say that in our office because she wasn't sure how to pronounce it. I'm like, no, it's just like school. SCH begins school. How do you pronounce that? You pronounce it as if it's SK, school, so Skexit, but just spelled like school, SCH. Anyway. All right. Well, never mind. So, but a lot of news this week. What did you want to hit first?
I want to hit the thing that I tweeted about, which is what happened in Arizona yesterday. We talked on this show, I think, last week about how the Florida Board of Education unanimously approved allowing families to take their children's education dollars elsewhere through the Hope Scholarship Program if they disagree with masking rules in their public school district. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey did something similar through executive order yesterday, which is if you disagree, or if your public school has some type of COVID constraint that inhibits your ability to get a good education for your child. So that could be if they fail to reopen for in-person instruction, or if they go remote and don't provide that option for in-person instruction, or if they have a mask mandate in their district, which goes against current state law, I believe state law, or it was a previous executive order by Ducey saying that you could not force all kids in a school district to wear masks. Anyway, this is a $10 million program. I think that's only a couple thousand students that would be able to access this, but the applications for this program are opening up this Friday, August 20th. And if you want to go to my Twitter thread, I actually have a link to where you can go apply for this funding. I believe it's around $7,000 per student. And I think it has an income cap. It's only children from households earning 350% of the poverty level, which I believe is about almost $100,000 for a family of four, is the max amount.
And again, just writ large, this is for families who say, is there a total program cap, by the way? Did you say that already?
It said that the press release says something like an initial investment of $10 million. Okay. So it's only a couple thousand
that's
students.
Not very, for any state, really. 10 million is not a lot, but it's the principle of the matter, and these things often grow and almost never shrink so over time. So, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's precisely what you're talking about, right? To say that, yes, that this is taking your money with you if you're not happy in the public schools, whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, various reasons people are not happy with the public schools, but this involves COVID.
Yeah, and obviously both of us would rather have the funding follow the student regardless of
the reason.
I mean, it could be academic outcomes. It could be maybe your school isn't safe for other reasons. And this is just another reason why families might want to be able to choose an alternative, which is the COVID restrictions in the school. But I still think it's a step in the right direction. It's still empowering more families to make a choice depending on the policies that are going on in the public school system. So it's still empowering more people, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with the reason for families making that choice.
Sure. I mean, it is part of the trend we've seen lately, which is states that already have a school choice culture have been expanding it. So this is the case of Arizona, one of the biggest, the top two states in the country, tied with Florida. Florida also doing the same, expanding an already existing base of support for school choice. What we see less of are states that have had no school choice using this as a rationale.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Florida do it. We saw a bill introduced in Arkansas that we talked about last week, Senate Bill 2, but they adjourned their special session, so that's not going anywhere. And then now Arizona's the latest one. I believe there are talks about people checking into this in other states as well. But yeah, it tends to be states that already have school choice programs. Just one other thing, I thought it would have been a better move to use an existing program and to say, just let's lump the eligibility in this existing program, which Arizona already has an education savings account program, but it's only for students with special needs and a few other categories. They could have just said, okay, well,
you're right.
Just like in Florida, where regardless of your income, regardless of your background, you can use this existing HOPE scholarship. We're just expanding the eligibility to allow all families to choose. They could have probably done that in Arizona. The teachers unions would have been really upset with that, but they're going to be upset about this too anyway.
That's a strategic approach you just articulated that I agree with, which I've watched over time, which is they sometimes will think, oh, it's better defensively if we have a bunch of little programs all over the place. That way it's harder for the union to come kill all of these little programs at once. Yeah, but you also fracture the support by having a bunch of little programs. I prefer this thing you're describing, where have them under an umbrella of one program that gets larger and larger. Therefore, your support becomes basically impenetrable. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to show the listeners how to get to that page to do the grant before we switch topics. But okay, yes, I'll do it really quickly. I put it into the chat, the link to this press release by Governor Doug Ducey. You can see that there's support from the Senate president and the Speaker of the House. This is not going through the legislature, though. This is done through executive order. But you can see in a big blue, bold text the word here. It says grant applications will be accepted here. So you can click that. This starts this Friday in a couple of days on the 20th of August. And you can apply for the grant once it opens on this page from the link I shared in the chat.
You know, and actually this just changing order a bit, but this actually pertains so much to what you just said about Arizona. Did you see the New Hampshire story? This is one actually from about 2 weeks ago, and I think I'd missed this till this week. But this is where the 4 different school districts in New Hampshire have partnered with Prenda, an Arizona-based micro school group, to fund through these districts, actual public school districts, using money from the state, but nevertheless funding Prenda, this micro school company, to run schools in groups of 5 to 10 kids, very small. That's why it's called micro schools. But this is a pretty innovative thing to do. And cheers to the folks in the Granite State for doing this, especially those in traditional public school districts, to say we will cooperate with this, and we will, if parents want this, we should make this available. So it's also part of the COVID money too. The same idea as what you just talked about in Arizona.
Yeah, I think this really goes to show you that competition could be a rising tide that lifts all boats. Where New Hampshire just passed one of the most expansive education savings account programs, which could be used for private providers of homeschooling pods and homeschooling co-ops and micro schools and other private providers of education. But now you have New Hampshire school districts run by the government upping their game too, and providing this type of learning experience for families within the traditional system.
Sort of, at least within the traditional funding system. It's not, but I understand your point. Yeah, it's you think maybe they didn't want to be seen as the only group left in the state who was not interested in providing options.
Yeah, I really wouldn't call this traditional anymore. I mean, this is
right.
This is the system responding to the needs of families in the face of competition, and I think that's a good thing. And I think if the public schools are part of that equation, that can be a great thing going forward.
Sure. Well, a lot of all of this need, as we've been talking about all year, is to do with, it started with a lot of the culture war stuff, as I mentioned before, the CRT and transgenderism and bathrooms and things like that, but has now become school closures and mask mandates. But boy, the day after our last week's episode, this really popped up with a clip from Tennessee, where a bunch of parents were screaming at school board members. And this clip went viral, went all over the place. But just since we didn't have a chance last week to show it, I wanted our viewers, in case they hadn't seen it, to see what the parents in Williamson County, Tennessee were doing last week.
Will not comply! Will not comply! Will not comply! Will not comply! Take that mask off! No more masks! No more masks! Child abusers! You are child abusers! There's a place for you guys! There's a bad place in hell! And everybody's taking notes, buddy! Keep that little smug! Put it back on! Put that mask back on! Put your mask on! Those poor kids stuck in that bacteria. How you like that? Put your mask on! Then we know who you are. We know who you are. No more masks.
Keep it calm. Keep it calm.
No more masks.
We're on these guys' side. They're on our side.
No, they're not. They're not on our side.
The police are on our side. The police are on our side. Let's calm down.
Yes.
Calm down. We know who you are.
We know who you are.
You can leave
We
freely,
know who you are.
but we will find you, and we know
You will
who you
never
are.
be allowed in
We
public
know who you
again.
are.
You will never be allowed.
I know
You never
who
let
you
it be
are.
allowed in public
I know
again.
who you are. I know who you are. Let him out. Let's let him out. Let him out. Come on.
Whoa! You better watch out. You better watch out.
Keep it
You better watch out.
Keep it calm. Everybody back up, please. Everybody back up. Back up, back up. I'm back, man. I'm on your side.
Please, back up.
I'm a parent.
Get out. Give me a lane. Get out.
Leave in peace.
You're good. Let him in peace.
Peace.
Be easy.
Everyone.
Peace.
Peace. Peace, but we know who you are. You know who you are.
Wow. So, like a couple of responses I have to that. Like on the one hand, first of all, they're shouting "will not comply." That's what all those parents are shouting after the vote to mandate masks in the schools in this Tennessee district. Parents are shouting "will not comply." You have a sense that, I mean, this is almost like if there was footage of the Boston Tea Party, this might have been what it was like, just the rage and the anger. You almost also, too, feel like maybe even some that are on your own side have a chance to maybe go a little overboard. The one guy screaming, "You'll never be allowed in public again." And I like that one other guy was trying to be like, okay, like, just
chill.
like, I have a feeling like if that had been me there, I'd be like, look, that's, I don't know about that. Like, why don't you just say something else? Like, anyway, so there's, obvious raw nerves being expressed there. But on a deeper level, I've been struck, Corey, with what people who are both the vaccine and mask mandate advocates have to position themselves to believe, and what they have to message. And on the one hand, they have to defend vaccines as this godsend that nearly makes it almost zero chance anyone will get severe COVID, because the vaccine, we need passports. They would argue everyone should take it. You're crazy not to take it. You've got to take the vaccine. We can mandate the vaccine everywhere we can. They believe that. Why? Because the vaccine is a, almost 100% chance of no severe COVID. On the other hand, you've also got to say, well, the vaccines can't be that effective, because if they were, then they would have no risk from someone else not wearing a mask. It would undermine the mask mandate if you really said that every single person who takes the vaccine has virtually zero chance of COVID. How mad and angry can they get about someone not wearing a mask? If I'm 100% protected because of my shot, how angry can I claim to be that someone else is not wearing a mask? And so that's, to me, there's almost this weird balancing act where they have to say, yes, the vaccine's effective, but it's not all that effective. Like it's sort of effective when I'm talking about vaccine passports, but it's not that effective when I'm talking about mask mandates. What do you say to that?
I mean, well, it comes down to wanting to control other people's kids. I mean, that's what we're seeing here when it comes to the mask mandates. But like when you get to this video, I mean, it just reminds me of, and this always goes back to Neil McCluskey from Cato Institute's battle map of public schools. We don't need to force everybody into the same system where they're all fighting with each other like this. I mean, it just makes no sense to force people into these situations. And the only way that we're ever going to get out of this in a way that doesn't irritate the crap out of half the population is to fund the student directly and to allow families to send their kids to schools that have rules and ways of teaching that align with their values. I mean, we need to stop trying to force everybody into the one-size-fits-all government school system, whether it comes to masks or types of provision of education and curriculum.
I think we're going to come out of this with more school choice than ever before. It's not just you and I like the idea, or you and I are messaging about it and we talk about it every week. And, it's that, this COVID shutdowns followed by COVID mask mandates are almost like a gift to school choice.
Yeah, we'll take it. I like that people are seeing school choice as one of the best solutions to all of these problems. Some people are going and fighting at the school boards, but I think a lot of those same people fighting at the school boards also should support having the funding direct follow the child to wherever they're getting an education. And I think, the school choice as a solution has rise to the surface as something that could fix all these problems, whether it comes to the CRT fights at the school board meetings or these mask fights. And we're seeing it play out in Florida with the Board of Education allowing all families to have scholarships through the Hope Scholarship Program if they disagree with the masking rule at the public school. Just yesterday, we had Arizona Governor Doug Ducey do the same type of solution based on school reopening decisions and based on school mask mandates. Again,
Okay,
I don't think.
what else you got? We got to move.
Yeah, let's keep going. So I don't know if you saw Chicago Teachers Union and the district are
I saw that on your
still
Twitter.
having trouble trying to figure things out. They're pointing fingers at each other. Of course, the union is just saying that they really want to go back. We've seen this all along with a bunch of the unions, especially Chicago Teachers Unions. Oh yeah, we've been fighting to reopen all along. I mean, Randy Weingarten's been saying that. But what they do is they say they want to reopen, but then they just put so many things into the deal that are unreasonable. And so the schools don't open because they don't 100% get their way. So here's this story at the Hill. Chicago teachers at a quote unquote impasse with the district ahead of reopening, union president says.
Yep. Oh, it's an impasse. Oh, well, we thought we were going to be able to go back to school, but now we probably need a whole bunch more concessions because COVID is so much worse than it was whatever the last time we got concessions was. And now we got to go back for more.
They want more money. They want more people in the building. They want billions of more dollars. The budget proposed by the district already had about $27,000 per student, which was a huge, I think, 34% increase over the past couple of years. So they're throwing a lot of more money at the problem. Chicago Teachers Union obviously isn't happy with that. They don't think it's enough. It's never going to be enough. And one thing that I thought was interesting is they've mentioned a couple times now that they want to have a system-wide metric to trigger a closure of the public schools. Last year, they had a trigger of a 3% community-wide positivity rate to close all schools, which is an arbitrary number. It was a low number, and it was unscientific to link the school closures to the community rate of transmission.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of heat for doing that last year. They want it again this year. So we'll see what happens.
Who could question the epidemiological, credentials of the teachers union in Chicago?
Did you also see the fight? Oh, you did see the fight with the Chicago Teachers Union yesterday on Twitter, where you remember a tweet last year where in December of 2020, they now deleted it, but they said something along the lines of, and it's a near exact quote. They said, "The push to reopen schools is rooted in racism, sexism, and misogyny." A lot of people didn't like that. The Chicago Teachers Union, it kind of blew up in their face because it looked like they were trying to just say anything to keep schools closed and to harm kids.
It's like, and also the kitchen sink. Like, what else did they throw? Why don't you throw in, Islamophobia or something? Why don't you throw in a bunch of other ones? I don't know.
Well, I mean, they deleted it after I replied with a story from CNN showing that school closures were disproportionately hurting the academic outcomes of students, of Black students and Hispanic students. And they deleted it after I replied with that. But then they also tweeted this yesterday. They're calling school choice. They're saying school choice has a racist history, and they had a bunch of responses to that. One of my responses was, who wants to tell them about the history of government schools? And I think you had a similar response.
Yes, my response was, the implication being that traditional public schools don't have a racist history? ? And then I said, oh, by the way, I forgot. What was Brown v. Board? And for those who don't know, Brown v. Board being the case that made segregation in traditional public schools illegal because up until 1954 in certain places, there was racial segregation in traditional public schools. So talk about a racist history. It's funny how they want to only describe this other sector of education as having racial history, while, implying that somehow their side didn't.
Yeah, do they want to get rid of all public schools too, based on their arguments? I mean, it's a genetic fallacy argument. Something could be good now, even if it wasn't good before. They get the history wrong anyway.
Right.
School vouchers have been around since the 1800s in Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire.
Mhm.
And in the 1950s, some segregationists opposed school choice because they knew it would lead to racial integration, which is what happens today because the public schools are still they're already segregated today. So funding students directly actually allows for more racial and class-based integration, which is the opposite of what they're arguing here.
Well, since they brought up race with their tweet, let me follow up with someone by the name of Greg Foreman. He has a YouTube channel called The Black Conservative Perspective, and it is always infuriated me when race is used as some sort of as if it's implied that all people of a certain race think the same thing about anything. I've always felt like I never thought the exact prescription of what I was supposed to think based on whatever school I was in or state I lived in or kind of job I had or anything. Like, how many people think of themselves as some sort of brainless product of simply their surroundings? Most people like to think they have their own ideas anyway. So to this end, this man, Greg Foreman, put out on his YouTube channel, put out some arguments about what's going wrong in traditional public schools today. And I think you might find some of the language familiar.
And since the woke revolutionaries want to talk about poor schooling, let's talk about it, because it's the right that is actually advocating for a better system that will help black people overcome this problem, right? With school choice, they're advocating for a system based off performance, okay? Based off having the funding follow the student and not the funding systems, okay? That are not being held accountable, that just waste government dollars, right? The right actually wants an outcome-based education where schools are funded based off their performance, where students can go to the best schools, right? If the schools are performance, they're going to get the money. But see, the left don't want that. They just want to fund these failing schools like what is happening in Baltimore, that is primarily run by black people, by the way, okay? They want to continue to fund that and then want to ask for more money and say, well, we got poor schooling. That's what's holding black people back. Okay, then why don't you let the private market take over then? We've tried what y'all want. It's not working. Let's go to a full school choice. Some people on the right say we should just demolish the whole public school system. But they don't want to do that. They want to keep doing the same failed thing, and then they want to blame that as the reason why black people are being held back, when the right is like, okay, fine, let's try something different. No, we can't do that. It's ridiculous. They're not looking for solutions. This is victimhood.
Fund students, not systems.
How about his reference to funding systems there, the word systems?
Yeah.
And, and also, I love that. He's like, we've tried what y'all want. It's not working. I just love that line, too. By the way, in this case, a couple of days ago, there was on the Choice Media Newswire, this clip, and some people wrote and said, oh, it's terrible that he brought up left versus right. Like, he's putting it in a kind of, duopolistic political paradigm of just left, right, over simplicity. And my response to that was like, it's not generally my favorite way to communicate. Let's just talk about left versus right. But my view is let all the school choice advocates communicate it in their own way. And the net effect of, rather than, filtering for just a very specific, narrow form of the message, let everyone express their school choice advocacy in their own way. And the net effect over time will be, growth in the movement. So anyway, I don't have a problem with this particular fellow saying left versus right. That's how he sees it. It's not exactly how I see it, but nevertheless, I thought you get a kick out of that systems line.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And yeah, I think you're right that you have your own audiences, and if he's amplifying school choice in front of his audience using his communication tactics, I think he knows his audience better than us. So
what do you got?
Another video, and I think you've heard of this story. I'm not sure if you saw the clip yet, but from CNN in Florida, they were reporting on the deaths of some people in the school system. It turns out that the number wasn't correct, and it's really
Was
interesting.
it
in this
4
clip.
teachers, they said?
That's what they said. That's not correct. And they tried to make it.
They put out a
tied-
news
they
headline that
tried-
implied, oh,
they-
look, look how much we need masks. Schools are really dangerous without masks. We live in this DeSantis, Florida, where masks aren't mandated. Therefore, isn't it sad that these 4 teachers have died from COVID? And people initially saw that headline and thought, wow, that sounds awful.
Well, and it is
Yet,
awful.
what you find
It-
out is,
it-
in fact, school hadn't started yet.
Yeah, it is awful, but it's just for the listeners, look at how they present the information and what facts they leave out, which try to listen for them to talking about when school starts. They don't let the viewers know that school hadn't even started yet, but they try to tie this to DeSantis and him allowing families to choose whether to send their kids to school in masks or not. So just check it out. CNN clip.
All right, more breaking news. We have a sad development we just learned of out of Florida. WFOR is reporting that 4 teachers from Broward County have died of COVID in a single day. The teachers' union chief told the affiliate that 3 of the 4, at least 3 of the 4, were unvaccinated. The status of the 4th not currently known. The county, of course, in a tense standoff with Governor Ron DeSantis over masks. DeSantis is threatening the district for requiring masks be worn in the schools. Since August 1st, we're told that Broward County had 138 employees test positive.
That is stunning, right? That number. And as we understand it, 2 of these teachers are actually from the same school. I think this is going to be met, obviously, with a lot of grief by that community. And it's just showing the cost of COVID there, especially for the unvaccinated.
In one day. And this is the context with which these officials in Broward County are asking for the freedom to make the decisions that they think are right for their schools.
Yeah, to protect not just the kids, right, but the teachers as well.
All right. Well, credit to her for pointing out that only two are from the same school, because I thought for a second they were going to imply all 4 were from the same school. But yeah, no one is making light of the fact that teachers died. But I just want to say too, this dying of COVID versus dying from COVID, this is a big distinction, and this is one that is lost a lot. And this is the one I have footage from a state health commissioner in Illinois saying if someone tests positive for COVID and they die of anything, including cancer, that they had that predated the COVID, they will be listed as a COVID death. This was at a press conference. This is not someone with a tinfoil hat in their basement, like I'm in my basement right now. This is actually a press conference from the Illinois health commissioner saying that if they test positive for COVID, they will be listed as a COVID death, regardless of what else might be going on. Like her example, cancer. So this dying of COVID that slipped into a story like that, like the CNN clip you just showed, triggers some skepticism on my part.
Well, and the worst part for me was they didn't mention that school actually starts today in those school districts,
Right.
August 18th for students. And this was last week sometime. And they tried to link the school, the students not having masks at school, or at least having the choice not to have masks at school, to the deaths of these teachers. And they also had to correct later on in their written article that it wasn't 4 deaths. It was 2 deaths of teachers and 1 assistant, which it's horrible that if anybody's, if anybody dies from anything. But then also like, do they go on the news on CNN and then report how many grocery store workers died, or how many people on the front lines in the hospitals, workers died? Like, why did they single out one profession unless they were trying to link this to Governor DeSantis's mask choice policy?
That's a good point. Why not give the answer for all kinds of different categories of professionals? Good point. But that sort of shows a political bias in that coverage. I wanted to quickly also point out an article we posted today on Choice Media. This is just a print article, but it's titled "Children in Much of Europe Will Be Going Maskless at School This Fall." And the subheadline, from Iceland to Denmark and England to Switzerland, many European children and their teachers won't be donning masks when they return to classrooms. So for those who want to frame the mask in schools debate as some sort of right-wing reactionary Trumpism or something, oh, well, the only reason that they must be, Fox News Channel, devotees or cult members, all right? Well, I guess you'll have to explain why are all these folks in England and Denmark and Switzerland, et cetera, are they all also right-wing zealots of the Sean Hannity variety, or might there be other information here on school masks? And so the article goes into mentions Ireland and Iceland and Norway, et cetera, Finland, the Netherlands, et cetera. It goes through a bunch of countries that would provide information. You just don't see this, in other words, in much of the traditional media because they don't want you to know about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting if you look at our map. It's changing by the week, but you can see, I think every state that is requiring all students in public schools to wear masks each day, Democratic governors, including Louisiana has a Democratic governor. Every state that is not allowing the public school districts to force all kids to wear masks and is allowing the families to choose have Republican governors, from what I can tell. Texas, yes.
I'm also a little confused by the color codes there. So California and New York, for example, are not the same color. Why is that?
So New York is a light green because based on this tracker, it's up to the local school districts to decide whether they can force your kids to wear masks.
Okay.
When it's dark green, that means it's up to the family, and the local school district can't decide to force your kid to wear a mask.
Okay.
If it's blue, local school district can't decide. The state decides that every school district must force all families to send their kids to school with masks.
All right. I would switch around the legend on that because having two
it's a little weird.
doing the opposite things sounds like it's confusing or
two
anyway.
greens is confusing, but it's light green district choice, dark green family choice, dark blue state choice.
I wanted to talk about this teacher who resigned over both critical race theory being taught in schools and also mask mandates taught in schools. And so the district said, oh, you're going to quit your job? We're going to charge you to quit. And that's this video.
This is Kansas?
It is.
You resigned, and then the school board hit you with a $1,000 fine?
Yep.
Explain that.
So I guess NEA and SMSD have a contract that says if you resign after June 4th, they're going to charge you with liquidation damages. To me, it was them changing the terms of my employment and me having no other option. I tried to give them as much time as possible. I called my principal right away because I wanted them to be able to replace me and not be struggling to get the first days of school without a teacher. And so, it was almost a 2-week notice for her. And then I immediately put in the paperwork so that they could open the job up and hire somebody. But then I got an email saying, turn in your computer and bring $1,000.
So one can only do the thought experiment of imagining if a teacher like this had quit because there weren't mask mandates, how that would have been, whether they would have been charged $1,000 versus this. It's like this teacher doesn't like mandates and he gets charged. But that's a thought experiment. But anyway, I thought it's pretty odd to quit a job and be charged money to quit.
Did you see this? I shared a clip from a school district near Philadelphia. They had a parent they were doing the school board meeting, and a parent was complaining about the mask mandates, and he went a little over his 3-minute time allotment.
Oh, I did see that. That was great.
They walked out on him. They walked out the meeting, and I saw this when it first happened, and I was thinking about posting it. I didn't know if I wanted to or not. And then when I went back to the link to the video, it had been set to private. I'm like, oh, well, I can't post it now. I don't have a clip of the video. because they scrubbed it. The school district scrubbed it from their YouTube channel and made it private. It turned out that a member of the public had a copy of it on their phone that they recorded in front of the screen of their laptop, which I shared on Twitter, because what was interesting was the school district set the original video to private, and then they re-uploaded the entire meeting essentially as if nothing happened. And when you get to that point in the video, you can see that they clipped out the view of them walking out of the auditorium.
A strategic edit. Why is a public school district editing public footage of a public meeting? Why are they omitting or editing out or redacting? This is a public event that is all the taxpayers should be allowed to see. The idea that they're going to, I called it Pravda in my tweet about it. I was like, wow, maybe they should rename their YouTube channel Pravda if that maybe weren't taken already. But I'm sorry. Okay, you're showing it now?
I don't have the,
okay.
Let me try to get the,
anyway, the point being that it's just, it's wow. That's what a CYA moment, right? How obvious is it that somebody doesn't want the public to know what's going on when they are editing out footage from a public meeting?
So can you see,
yeah,
tell me if you can hear this or not.
Go ahead, walk off the stage. Walk off the stage.
So you can see them in the corner getting up and walking out. It's hard to see on this StreamYard, but if you go to my tweet, you'll be able to see it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Right.
I'll conclude with some observations and a question. First, the observations.
In a second, it'll cut to the full screen showing people walking out towards the end.
Really? Come on.
Getting up, walking out.
Yeah, and what was their reason for walking out again?
They said, you're not following the rules. You went over your 3 minutes. We're getting up and walking out. That's pretty much it. And you can see in their video.
Aaron,
we'll be back, and we hope in 20 minutes.
You think that's appropriate? Tori, you think that's appropriate?
In accordance with our rules.
That's appropriate. There are about a handful of people here to speak tonight.
As long as you're breathing, the air is going in.
And there's the new version where they cut through it.
Okay, yeah. Well, please. I think that, I don't mind them enforcing time limits. I'm fine with that, actually, regardless of what side is what, whether I agree with someone or not. I think time limits are fine. It's just the idea of editing out the footage. That's the part that I found the outrageous part.
Yeah, I don't think the parent should have went over the 3 minutes. But another parent did come up and say he can have my 3 minutes, which was nice of her. But just the stealth edits, and then, because it just looked bad for them to walk out like that and just say, we're taking a 20-minute recess and then completely cut out the footage that makes them look bad.
I wanted to bring up a video, a pretty produced video, actually, that came out of the office of South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. And he released a video about charter schools that kind of took me by surprise. And so here it is.
We are blessed to live in a nation where in public education, you can still be creative and innovative. Every kid doesn't learn the same. So why not design an education system or a school around the way a child wants to learn? Charter schools are incredibly successful all across our nation. And here's the beauty of it all. It can be started by a parent, a teacher, businesses, nonprofits. The door is wide open for innovation and creativity in the space of education. Since 1992, charter schools have been a powerful part of education options for our parents. Here's what we know. When a parent has a choice, the kid has a better chance. And out of the top 100 highest performing schools in America, charter schools represent about 21%. Out of all the schools in America, charter schools are around 12%. And the beauty of charter schools is they are more diverse than most public schools. 1/3 of all the kids in charter schools are Hispanic. Right around 1 out of 4 are African Americans. Charter schools are more diverse, higher performing, and frankly, brings innovation into the workspace. That's great news for our kids, great news for our nation, and frankly, really good news for their future.
All right, so I kind of looked into it. There's some talk about South Carolina having some charter school laws changed in 2022. So maybe this is part of a messaging campaign that's along those lines. But at any rate, I thought it's always great to see Tim Scott.
Yeah, Tim Scott's great. I like his. I think he said this at the RSC meetings too when he was speaking something about when a family has a choice, the child has a better chance. And he said that in that video as well. So I always like that quote. And he was also the co-sponsor of the School Choice Now Act, right, in Congress.
That's correct.
I don't know if it's still floating around, but
yes,
there was a push for it when DeVos was Ed Secretary.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, did you see the tweet from the previous Ed Secretary, Arnie Duncan?
No, not this week. No.
I don't know if we want to bring that up. It's such a hateful tweet. But here it is. Here it comes.
He has a reputation for being such a, I don't know,
nice
moderate guy, but perhaps I'll be surprised. Go ahead.
Yeah, hold up. Let me share my screen again. Yeah, the suspense is killing us. So there's a tweet saying that Abbott tested positive for COVID, the governor of Texas, and he had been vaccinated already. I believe he's asymptomatic. But Arnie Duncan responds by saying, quote, "Never wish illness on anyone ever, but damn." Like, really?
Wow. It's the but there that makes it caustic, right? That's what if it just said, "I never wish illness on anyone," and then say, period, and then be like, "Damn, this is shocking news," or something. It's the but damn.
Yeah.
That makes it imply that, in this case, maybe I do wish illness on somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I think Randy Weingarten just tweeted out the other day that a conservative, I don't remember who it was, but it was a similar kind of response that people were like, "Are you like celebrating that this person has COVID? That's kind of messed up."
Yeah.
I can't find that tweet off the top of my hand, but if you want to go look for it, it's on Randy Weingarten's timeline, and it is ratioed. So
yeah. I'm out of stories for the week on my end, Corey, but I did also just want to mention, I don't know if you know, New York City is just now instituting this vaccine passport for indoor locations policy. And no, this is not education related. This is involving like bars and restaurants and venues and things. But it's they also have no exceptions for medical exemptions. In other words, there are no exemptions along those lines.
No religious exemptions either?
None at all. No exemptions at all.
For private businesses. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, if a private business wants to have this rule and reduce their customer base or to cater to a particular type of customer, they should be able to do that. And they're doing it in DC, where I live. They have certain restaurants have certain rules, and other restaurants have more of an open kind of rule, and people choose based on that. But so this is New York City. Other cities have done this too, though, right? Or is New York City?
Well, I've heard that San Francisco passed it. I don't know that it's actually been implemented yet, but like here, I can send you a link right now in our Facebook. And So I gotta say, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that it's happening. I would think that there, I sent you the thing in a link in Facebook, but I'm just surprised that they're going to do this, because I can't imagine that, imagine somebody who's afraid of, take your typical, I'm the most afraid of COVID person in your brain that you can, maybe someone you personally know. And I would think to myself, I know people like this, but they are vaccinated and maybe they do want to wear masks most of the time, but I don't think they're for this. I think this is for even most of them would say my own vaccination and my own mask is enough. I don't need to also, on another third layer of all that, is ban someone else that hasn't been vaccinated, who may not even be able to be vaccinated for medical reasons.
Yeah, I think this is government overreach. This shouldn't be the decision of the government to force everybody in a particular city and all businesses in that city to require this. I mean, how's the implementation
San Diego
going to
County,
work?
where the average age of a COVID death was 77, where the percentage of deaths was far less than a percent, where the and all this, again, this big issue that is almost media blackout on the issue of dying with COVID versus dying of COVID. This idea that if someone dies, people die every day. It's always sad in anyone's family when you're close to them. But that if somebody dies and they have COVID, that this is almost all the time written up as the cause of the death, even if they have leukemia, even if they have a heart attack, even if they have lung cancer, even if they have all kinds of other things. And so with the numbers that small, so skewed to comorbidities, and then so easily conflated as if COVID's the cause of death when it's often not. That's what I think of when I see these vaccine mandates. People that just refuse to accept the numbers and the caveats I've just described.
Yeah, I just wonder what the implementation is going to look like in New York City with all.
That's the other thing.
Vaccine passport. I mean,
exactly.
What are the
every nail salon is going to be some sort of, medical document checker. Every I don't know, indoor hamburger place is now going to have to be reviewing someone's papers to see what sort of medical proof they have and whether it seems, fabricated or, whether they believe it, etc. Meanwhile, natural immunities treated as if that's nothing, when in fact, natural immunities may be actually the better. Might be more important than a vaccine, might be more useful. The vaccines seem to be dying out after 3 to 6 months. There's talk now of new booster shots and maybe repeated booster shots. After the second shot, there's talk now of maybe needing more shots because they're finding case counts with COVID. And so what they don't talk about is natural immunity. I have it. I caught COVID a couple weeks ago. I just explained it on this program. It was like the flu for me. That's what it was like. I now have natural immunity. So, go ahead.
I wonder if these kind of rules will have unintended consequences in forms of certain types of segregation, where some people of different backgrounds might be more likely, if they're less likely to get the vaccine for whatever reason, to be shut out of public life, or in this case, private businesses. I mean,
it's certainly true that minority populations have, in general, been less willing to be vaccinated. So there's that. I mean, it's. I'm not the first person to note the bit of irony that there is, where people on the left will say, if you want to vote, you can't possibly ask for people to provide proof of who they are. That would be racist. But if you want them to have a hamburger somewhere, then you can. Then you must always have them show papers to confirm who they are. And that, this logic goes that further, that even if there's just a disparate impact of certain, groups, then a policy like suspending kids in school can be called a racist policy, even if there's not actual evidence of racism. If you just see statistical differences, that's considered evidence of racism when it comes to something like suspensions in schools. Just the disparate impact over broad statistical percentages. That's considered enough evidence for racism. And yet, disparate impact with these vaccine passports is ignored. That disparate impact is considered not racism. So I'm not the first to make that point, but there it is.
While we're still in New York City, real quick, did you see this change.org petition started by a teachers union member, public school teacher in New York City? They're listing all of these demands, and they tack on a real interesting one at the end. But they're calling for mandatory vaccines for all children and over the age of 12 and all staff who are eligible to get vaccinated. They're calling for mandatory masking, weekly COVID testing for at least a third of the school population, social distancing, remote learning options for everybody. Then they tack on this at the very end, no assessment of learning loss.
Oh,
like
wow.
you gave away the game again.
Oh, wow.
You call for something.
What a good one, Corey. So this isn't even... This is saying no assessment of learning loss. It's, in other words, it's not even that they're against certain kinds of remedial approaches to the learning loss that they think would be, or certain, maybe even, teacher evaluations somehow should not be connected to learning. No, they don't even want to assess the learning loss. Like it's not as if they're just against. They're not against the wrong approach to addressing learning loss. They're saying we don't even want to see the learning loss. We can't even be told that the learning loss is there. This is our petition. Don't see it. Wear a blindfold to the learning loss.
Yeah, and here's the cover image of their petition: safety now or safety walkouts. So if you don't give us all these things we want, we're signing on to say that we're not going to go back to work again.
And then, is that was change.org you said? Can you pull that up?
Change.org petition. Yeah, let me pull it up. Here is the Twitter account of the person. He started this change.org petition. You can open it up.
We demand safety now. Don't you love that safety is in big giant letters, or in that case, safely is in big giant letters. Safely. And part of their safely is no assessment of learning loss. What? Because of the danger in even seeing what the learning loss would be.
It's dangerous. It's going to make everybody upset.
Oh my goodness, yes. This under the guise of safety, we must not know what the learning loss is. This is the logic.
Yeah. We demand. They have almost 5,000 signatures.
By the way, right?
4,000
always demanded. Yeah. By the union.
Why should they be able to demand all these things over the entire school system? Why can't families be put in the driver's seat? And why shouldn't the customers be the ones demanding things? That's how it should be.
The ones paying the bills anyway.
There's only one way to do that.
Right. Yeah. No, that's the idea that you just put an entire industry. You just allow it's not even the employees to run the industry. It's these union bosses who are. Gee, if you could just randomly pick teachers, that would be so much better than the kind of person that becomes a union boss, right? Like that's a different kind of person than a typical teacher. I think I can safely generalize that. And so, the idea that and yet so many of them believe in, it's a Marxist principle. It really is. Traditional public education, the way it's run, the way you can't pay anybody more if they work harder, can't pay anybody less if they're terrible. It is.
It's a socialist industry. I mean, it's run by the government. The schools are run by the government. It's funded by the government. Compulsory education laws by the government. There
are other things way better run by the government, where they actually have competitive bids, and they, will decide which contractor gets to build the library or something like that. They, at least there's competition sometimes in government expenditures. Here, it's just this monopoly that clings to power. Well, but But anyway, wow, that's a great one. That's a great one to hit there. All right, so is that what you got for this week?
So you're in New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
So one last thing, it's a new study, came out 2 days ago at a peer-reviewed journal by Marcus Winters and Colin Shanks. And they say they exploit randomization. I don't know if it's a random lottery for admissions, but they argue it's causal. And here's the takeaway from the abstract. Enrolling in a Newark, New Jersey charter school that participated in the deferred acceptance assignment process leads to a large and statistically significant increase in math and ELA scores. Enrolling in a charter school that is operated by either the Knowledge is Power program, KIPP, or Uncommon charter school networks has an especially large effect. So rigorous study finding positive effects of getting the chance to go to charter schools in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah, and in Newark, New Jersey, they have not all charter schools in Newark, at least as recent as my information is, but most of the charter schools in Newark are on a form along with the traditional public schools. And so parents have their first choice, second choice, third choice, that kind of thing, in what was called the One Newark plan. So it's this consolidated school choice, paperwork essentially that parents can fill out. And so I bet it sounds like what Marcus Winters, who a guy I've known for 10 years, by the way, always does great work. What I suspect they did is they looked at, the kids that had selected both some charter and some traditional public schools in their form, and then, used the process by which they were then sent to one or the other of those kinds of schools as, as kind of a, I wouldn't quite call it random, I guess, because they are selecting schools and there is an order given. But nevertheless, I get the idea of how they might have done it.
I think like the Louisiana scholarship program experiment, they call it an experiment because it uses a random lottery component, but they have a ranking system too there in Louisiana. And I think they compared the first choice, getting your first choice to go to a private school, to the next choice, which is likely to be a public school or something. I don't remember exactly yet, but it was a similar kind of thing. And
we could have it simply as something where you take only kids where their first two choices was one of each. And you could even have it where half of your sample, the charter was the first, and the other half of the sample, the traditional public was the first. But that all of the kids in the group had traditional public and charter as their first two, and switch it around. So anyway, you could imagine something like that where they could then look at those numbers. I mean, of course, the other side always says it's not applicable. It's cherry picking and all the smartest kids go to the charter anyway, or at least the ones with the most involved parents go to the charters. And so therefore these are apples and oranges and the schools aren't any different. It's just a different group of kids showing up. But every time you see these kinds of comparisons done this way, it always looks to me, all the ones I see look like the charter schools do better, where they, in the past, it was more just a case of a random lottery where, people would look at if you won the lottery and got the charter versus lost the lottery and went back to traditional public. That's kind of the older way to do that kind of study. But anyway.
Yeah, they might have done a regression discontinuity design, which is the second best behind a pure random lottery, because they essentially argue that if you barely get your first choice versus you barely miss the cutoff for that first choice and you go to the second choice, you can argue that if you're close enough around the cutoff, that it's essentially a random chance that you fall on one side or the other of that cutoff line. So that could have been it. Maybe we should read the full study and figure it out.
All right. Well, thanks for watching Random Assignment, everybody, and listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. I know I should say this at the beginning. I always say it at the end. But and also, hey, sign up for that once a week Friday email from Choice Media, the best weekly summary of education news in the business from choicemedia.tv.
And at the American Federation for Children, if you want to help us in the fight for funding students, not systems, you can go to fundstudentsnotsystems.org. Thank you guys so much for coming out, checking us out at the Random Assignment Podcast.